Hey, this is Chuck Dixon, and I'm back to answer all of your questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Oh, so many comic books. Um, all right, first one out of the gate. This one's a winner. Anthony Kotorak. Oh man, there's no way I pronounced that right. Um, he asks, I was intrigued by your mention of working with Rob Liefeld on Captain America, but you left the project. I would love to know more about that. Well, wouldn't we all? Um, this is my image of Cap. Jack Kirby, classic Jack Kirby. Lots of great artists that worked on it. I've always loved the character, loved him since I was a kid. I knew he was a character that was around when my dad was, younger, and it sort of gave the character I don't know, some gravity when he showed up in the Avengers comic. It was a very exciting time for me as a kid to see this classic character return, and I wanted to know so much more about him. So yeah, this is my image. This is not. um, Marvel had a thing called, what was it, Heroes Reborn or Heroes Take a Shot at Making More Money? I don't know what it was called, but the a lot of the classic Marvel characters were divided up amongst some of the Image guys, and Rob Liefeld got Captain America, and Rob for some reason wanted me to work on Cap, and I agreed, but I wanted a promise out of him that he would, I would provide him with reference because part of the story was set in World War II. I would provide him with reference, and would he promise to please follow my reference? And also pay a little more attention to storytelling than he had recently. When Rob first arrived on the scene, he was actually a solid comic artist, in my opinion. And I thought, well, let's get back to that. I mean, and I thought he might do it because, hey, this is a shot to return to Marvel and show what you can do for them, instead of whatever the hell it was you were doing at Image. Let's get serious. Let's make some real comic books with a real classic character. And I thought he respected that. And he didn't. So I wrote him a rather detailed outline for a 6-issue miniseries and then said, let me know when you want me to start scripting. Because, at that time I was writing full script. Still do. I don't write Marvel style. And he promised that he would. Another promise. Um, well, he never did ask for a script, and I kept pestering his underlings, you know, because I never heard from Rob once I agreed to do the work, and he I never heard from him, and they wouldn't give me a straight answer. When do I start the script? I thought this thing was rolling. I want to get to the script. I'm really anxious to work on the script. Give me a deadline for the script. No deadlines. One day, faxes start coming over my fax machine. Their artwork, Rob Liefeld artwork, that kind of looked like stuff from the outline I wrote. So he was working from an outline, maybe a 10-page outline for a 6-issue miniseries, which meant he was winging it, totally winging it. And I immediately noticed an absence of any of the reference that I had sent. His World War II tanks and planes and uniforms looked like the kind of stuff that most of us drew on our loose leaf notebook pads when we were bored in math class. Just bad stuff. So got one of his underlings, and I said, "Look, I got 28 pages of artwork here. It's hideous. I don't want my name on this book. I don't want to be associated with this book. I don't even ever want to see a copy of this book when it comes out." and his underling said, I don't know what you mean by that. I said, I don't know how to make it clearer. I'm not the writer on this book anymore. Find someone else. I don't want my name on this. And so I quit. And it was a good gig pay wise. I mean, I was getting paid like 5 times my normal Marvel rate. to work on this thing. It would have been a huge payday, but I got my pride. I wanted to stay in this business a long time, and I didn't want people bringing this piece of crap to me to sign. So there you have it. There you go. There is the blunt truth of it. But one good thing came out of it. I based a comic book character on Rob. So there's that. Harding McFadden says, okay, I've got one for you. You had mentioned the other day on Facebook that the Baron story you wrote for the Kolchak collection, that's Kolchak the Night Stalker, it had you sweating bullets. So why was that? Related question, what made you make the transition from scripts to prose work? Natural progression or something else? Yeah, my very first paid published prose work was a short story about the Jersey Devil in this collection of Kolchak the Night Stalker stories, an anthology. And yeah, I sweated it because, I'm a comic book writer, first and foremost. It's in my DNA. Prose, even though I read a lot of prose, I read a lot of novels and short stories, it wasn't as natural a fit to me as comics were. Comics are like a second language to me. Prose is not. And so I really, really worked hard on this story because, as I said in the previous question or answer, it's a matter of pride. My name's going on it. I want it to be good. Now, I went on to write further short stories for other anthologies published by Moonstone, sort of sharpened my skills. And then, eventually I turned to writing novels. And, the plain and simple reason for that is that I wasn't getting as much comics work. I was following leaving CrossGen. I was kind of in the wilderness. I mean, I was one of the CrossGen talents who was not picked up by the majors, and for various reasons. And I had to find work where I could. And with the encouragement of, several people I knew, primarily my wife, I went in, I took a stab at writing novels, and it paid off. It paid off. I got in at the tail end of the ebook gold mine, and, I kept on writing. Today, most of my stuff is published by more experienced e-publishers than me. Anybody's a more experienced e-publisher than I am. And, I've learned to enjoy it. I've learned to enjoy it. It offers a creative freedom that comics don't, because I don't have to wait for an artist. I'm directly describing the stuff to the audience rather than describing it to a penciler. It has to be told a little more artfully. That was the thing that always hung me up, but I think I'm better at that now than I was. I tend to write terse anyway, so it's not that important. And it's an interesting outlet for me. So there you go. Okay, Brian Ricard. Were you at all involved in the original conception of the General, where he was portrayed as a child, and why did you decide to age him up? Okay, that's an interesting story. Well, it's geeky interesting. The General is a character, Hadrian Armstrong, that I created as a Batman villain, recurring Batman villain. And he's basically a kid. He's like a 12-year-old, 11-year-old kid who's sees himself as a military genius. And, he's a combination of Alexander the Great and George Patton in his mind. And he turns to crime to get his kicks. And he's, I just thought he was an interesting character to have Batman go up against a child. And kind of a blind spot for Batman because, he has to learn that, a child can be just as ruthless and evil as an adult. So yeah, for most of the run, he was a kid, but in one arc in Legends of the Dark Knight, he was an adult. Suddenly grown up, all grown up, like 20 years older. The reason for this is because Watchtower, the arc that he appears in, was proposed to me by Archie Goodwin, the editor of Legends of the Dark Knight at the time, was proposed to me to be set in the future. So I really didn't age the General up for this arc. It was to be set in the future. And basically, it was to be the story that precedes Return of the Dark Knight. That this is the story that causes Batman to retire. And we all thought it was a cool idea. And we hired Mike McMahon to do the artwork, gave it kind of a 2000 AD look, and everything was cool until I guess it was Paul Levitz heard about it, or maybe Frank Miller heard about it. And they didn't like the idea of me treading on that continuity, that future continuity. So they put the kibosh on the story, but they said you could still run, but it couldn't be set in the future, even though if you look at the story, it's obviously set in the future. So there had to be some minor rewrite to dialogue, and then I had to lose a scene I absolutely loved, where Bruce Wayne goes to Tim Drake to ask him for help, and we find that Tim Drake he's left. He's no longer Robin the Boy Wonder. He like owns a tech company, and he's living in the suburbs, and he's got a wife and kids. And basically, he just tells Bruce, "No, I'm never coming back. I told you before. I'm never coming back. I've got a new life now." And the page was drawn and everything. Well, I'd love to see that page again. The page was drawn and everything, but it had to be trimmed and another page written to fill in for it. So there you go. I didn't age the general up. I was a victim of editorial direction. John Morgan, Bat Neal. He says, you're good at writing Western era dialogue. Some others are not, such as a comic I recently read I won't mention. Well, then why mention it, John? So why for is this? As the Cowboys used to say. It isn't entirely a choice of words. It's more a patois thing, perhaps. Certainly a familiarity of the genre or a region where such jargon is used helps. But in the end, is it just instinct? Well, the thing about writing Westerns is we really don't know how they talked. We can read writings by them, and you can't read newspapers and things like that. One great guide I found was Ulysses S. Grant's autobiography, which is written by him and arranged for publication by Mark Twain. Is very much written conversationally. I suspect he may have actually dictated it. So it's Grant speaking in his language, and Grant was anything but an aristocrat type. So he didn't speak like a bum, but he probably spoke close to what, and used the kind of vocabulary that average people did then. And that to me is a good guide. It's kind of a snapshot of the way people talked. The rest of it is, I rely on the fact that back in the Old West, there was no radio, there was no television, there was no mass media in which the populace communicated. So there was no set way of talking. I mean, we all in the United States now pretty much talk the same way. There might be a, slang word, regional phrase, but in general, we all talk the same way, the same sentence structure. We use the same vocabulary. It's just a common language pool. Well, they didn't have that then. Throw into the mix that a lot of these people were recent immigrants to the United States, and the English was a second language, and wow, you can just go crazy. So what I do is I write it. It just sort of comes to me. You create a voice for the character, and you just decide, well, this is the way he talks, and this sounds right, or this doesn't sound right. And most important is you can't use words that they wouldn't have used, or phrasing they wouldn't have used. Because there's ideas, that we deal with today, that would be foreign to the people of the Old West, people of the past, even the most recent past. If you think about it now, you probably have 6 conversations a day that if you had heard 30 years ago, you wouldn't even understood what you were saying, because technology has taken over so much of our lives. So yeah, there's kind of a freedom, and as you referenced in your question, John, you just want to be aware of anachronisms. But otherwise, the West that I write about is a fictional West. It's not real. It's not. I don't write historical Westerns. I write in that imaginary, iconic, glorified version of the American West that most movies and TV shows and novels populate. So so there you go. Good question. Steak or chicken cheesesteak? It's a Philly question. The cheesesteak. It's Philadelphia's greatest gift to the world after the Declaration of Independence. I grew up with these things, cheesesteaks and hoagies. If you don't know what a cheesesteak is, it's like thinly sliced minute steaks, fried up, usually with onions and peppers and American cheese. Don't let anybody tell you different. People who don't know anything about cheesesteaks and they come to Philly or they hear you're from Philly, they go, well, which cheesesteak do you like, Pat's or Geno's? They're the most famous cheesesteak places in Philadelphia. Well, they both suck, and they're both not really Philly cheesesteaks. I mean, they use Miracle, not Miracle Whip, spray cheese for God's sakes. They use Velveeta. Ugh. And they're not, and they don't chop the steak fine enough. They usually just give you like a slab of steak on a short Amoroso roll, and the roll is the most important part. That roll is made with drinking water from Philadelphia, and that's the important thing. You got to get that roll. I live in Florida now, and they've opened a bunch of Wawas, and you can get a hell of a hoagie at Wawa. And what they do is they actually import the bread dough down from Philly, and the bread is baked here, but it's from Philly. And there's a couple of other like Philly cheesesteak places and hoagie places here in Tampa, and they actually have bottled water, bottled tap water sent down to use to make their own bread. So pretty cool. And then another place just has Amoroso air freight, actual fresh rolls. So yeah, it's I just bored everybody to death, or made them hungry. I don't know which. I know I'm hungry. I can go for a cheesesteak right now. And chicken or cheesesteak, it doesn't matter. You put enough crap on it, you could be eating cardboard. Okay. Do you still draw? Yeah, I'm a compulsive doodler. Um, I don't, I really never drew much professionally. I drew my very first comic book job way back when, because no one else would draw it. So I wrote and drew my first, professional job. And I drawn a couple of things after that, and I'll do sketches at conventions, and then I'll play around like French Batman here, and put stuff up on the web. Um, but yeah, I enjoy it. A lot of times I'll doodle on the grocery list, which makes my wife think I'm not listening. But hey, and I probably not. I never listened in math class. I did a lot of drawing in math class. Uh, but yeah, I think everybody that writes comics thought they were going to be an artist first, or for the most part. And then you get to the point where you realize, yeah, I'm just not as talented or disciplined as as Steve Ditko or Gil Kane. So I just sort of gave up that idea to write the stuff and get people far more talented than I to draw the stories. Um, I guess if I had any regret on my career, it's that I didn't stay in art classes and I didn't improve my cartooning skills. Um, I can do sketches and stuff like that, but I'm not really good at basically consistency. Jim Engel once told me that he was trying to find something nice to say about my cartooning, because he does like my cartooning, but the nicest thing he could say was that my drawing is very geometric, which I find funny. Uh, but um, so yeah, I like to do the drawings for fans at shows, especially for kids. I do a lot of these little sketches when I do store appearances, just give them away to kids. And it's funny with kids, it's hard to give a kid. They've been warned about strangers so much, that even in a comic shop with their parents standing right behind them, when you try to give them something, it's like, oh. So you gotta look to the parent and go, is it all right? And the parent says, yeah, take it. I'll also do layouts, these miserable layouts. if I'm writing a story and there's a concept that I think I'm just not getting across, or I'm not making clear, or even more often, my artist does not either speak English or English as a second language, I'll do these very simple sketches to get across what it is I'm talking about. And the thing with foreign working with foreign artists, it isn't so much the languages, it's the visual references. You know, is he going to understand what I'm talking about in the story? Maybe I'll provide a picture. So if there's no photo available and it's something I literally have to make up, I'll do it. This one was a gag for a Simpsons comic where uh, Bart is drawing up one of his many plans for revenge against Principal Skinner. And I thought it'd be fun just to, to do it up myself and make it clear for the artist what I was going for. And it was just fun to draw. So there you go, my limited drawing ability. But it does make me appreciate what comic artists do, because I have drawn hundreds of pages on my own, before I got into the business, when I didn't have an artist to draw my stuff. So I know what goes into a page. I really know what goes into drawing a very lousy page, but I do know the hours of labor and the intensity and the level of concentration and discipline it takes. And I think that's helped in my writing, because I understand what the artist is going through and try to give them a break as often as possible. All right, next question. Your short run on Guy Gardner was my favorite story arc for one of my favorite characters. How fun was it to write him, and why was your stay so short? Well, here's another interesting question. um, yeah, I was brought on to write Guy, and this is another inside baseball story. I'm going to tell tales out of school. So I was brought on by the editor to take over Guy Gardner, and Joe Staton was the artist. Well, when he said Joe Staton's going to stay on as artist, I'm like, yeah, Joe's awesome. I love Joe, and I'd love to work with him on a regular basis. Particularly on this character. I always felt Guy Gardner was a bit misunderstood. He was kind of a stand-in focus of hate for people that didn't like Republicans or conservatives, and so they always presented him as a boob and a nitwit, and a bigot, which it's never been Guy Gardner. Yeah, he's hot-headed. He's you know he's not Hal Jordan. That's why he was created, uh, and sort of a slob Green Lantern. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. So yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm all on board, and and the editor wanted to start with a year one showing Guy Gardner's life, which has never been shown. So I had to create a family and all this other stuff, and I created this what I thought was a really cool framework with aliens, so that we could have action in there and give Joe a chance to strut his sci-fi stuff. And everything was going great. I was happy with the work, and Joe was happy with the work, and we're just moving along. So then comes the day when um, I found a piece of reference I thought Joe might be able to use. So I called him on the phone. I said, Joe, I got this reference. I want to fax it over to you. I don't have a fax number. For this upcoming issue, this next script, or even the script after, I can't remember. And Joe says, oh, I'm not on the book anymore. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I got fired. The editor fired me off the book. And I'm like, well, he didn't tell me. And then it struck me. Yeah, he didn't tell me because he knew I took the book on because Joe was the artist. And I thought, damn. So I called the editor. I think I had to track him down. He was avoiding me. And I said, what the hell? And he goes, but I got you this great artist. I got you this great artist. And I'm like, I don't care. I want to work with Joe. And he goes, yeah, but I got this guy. He says, Tom Tenney? I'm like, no. He says, well, he's on the Wizard Hot list. He's one of Wizard's top 10 hottest artists. I'm like, yeah. And the editor says, I got his brother. So I get the brother of an artist I never heard of. And I don't know. I don't think either one of them had the chops for comics when it comes right down to it. Maybe they've gotten better by now. I wouldn't know. But I said, look, I'm off this book. And he goes, oh no, he's screwed at this point because, I was spoiling him, handing in scripts way ahead of time. And he says, can you stay on just a little while longer? And I said, no, I want off this book today. And he says, well, you know, is there anything I can do? And I thought, well, yeah, my buddy Bo Smith, who the editor knew as well, he's like the biggest Guy Gardner fan in the world. I'll stay on for a few more issues if you give Bo a shot at taking the book over. And he did, and Bo did some awesome stuff on the book, created this whole new cast of characters and everything else, just changed the direction of the book. And you know, because of Bo's efforts, kept that book going for a while when it was on its last legs when I left it. And of course, Bo's tireless self-promotion helped as well. But so yeah, there's a little inside baseball for you. But I think the but one thing came out of it was the Guy Gardner clone that I used in Birds of Prey as a sort of utility tough guy, and that was a fun arc. Me and Greg Land and Drew Geraci in the early issues of Birds of Prey. I think we ended up calling him Joe Gardner. I can't remember. So there you go. That's how I got on Guy Gardner and how I got off. Chris Gellard, I hope that's right. What was your personal favorite story, arc, or event that you helmed at DC? I was at DC for 11 years solid. A couple of brief returns now and then, but 11 straight years. So there's a lot of stuff, and almost all of it relates to Batman. Working with Graham Nolan on a run on Detective Comics, I mean, a dream come true. Absolutely, getting to work with my buddy on a book. I mean, the oldest continuously published comic probably in the world. Yeah, we got to do some great work. We were both on the same page, of the same mind. Graham was such a huge Batman fan that he really brought 100, 210% to the party, and it was a nice long run. We got to do some very, very interesting stuff. Another one for me that was a highlight was Detective Annual number 7, featured Captain Leatherwing. It was an Elseworlds annual summer event, and I decided to go with pirates. And I got Kike Alcatena, genius Argentine artist, to do the art on the story. And he did a kind of a Howard Pyle, retro golden age of illustration sort of approach to it. And wow, is that a beautiful book? We got to do another 10-pager in another Batman anthology later. That is also just a beautiful piece of work. But if you ever get a chance to look for this, I mean, it is simply gorgeous, and it was so much fun to write pirates and recast, the denizens of Gotham City as Buccaneers. Very, very cool project to work on. Punisher Batman, another big highlight. I campaigned for Punisher to meet Batman for 2 years before I got this, and just a dream to write. Archie Goodwin was my editor, and Johnny Romita Jr. on the art, Klaus Janson on the inks. I mean, I was in comic book heaven, and with 2 years of campaigning, I had a lot of time to think about this story before writing for it. It may be the most prepared I ever was for writing anything. Was jumping onto this project. Man-Bat. I got to do a lot of Man-Bat. I got to do a mini-series with Flynn Henry. I brought him back into Robin. I think, yeah, did Scott Beatty help on those issues? I can't remember. I think he did. Yeah, because we had the baby Man-Bat. And I got to do redo his origin in another annual stunt, and again with Kike Alcatena. And it was, while we were working on this, Frank Robbins, the creator of Man-Bat, passed away. And I was able to convince Archie Goodwin to put a memorial at the very end of the story. I usually don't do that kind of stuff, but I thought, wow, the guy just passed away, and he never gets the credit. Frank Robbins never gets the credit. Most people don't have any idea who created Man-Bat. And, so, I went to Archie and I said, could we please, do just some mention of Frank Robbins as a creator? And Archie was like, a little reticent, Archie was never really a company man, but he didn't like to make trouble either. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they'll feel about that upstairs. And I said, the hell with how they'll feel upstairs. It's Frank Robbins, for God's sake. What could it hurt? You know? So he put it in. I think I don't know if he ever got permission to do it. Uh, Another project was Batman Predator 3 with Rodolfo DiMaggio on art. I love Predator, and I wanted to do a Batman Predator crossover so bad my teeth hurt. But they kept telling me that, it was a nightmare for legal. And so I kept pestering. And then something came up where, for one of those rare moments in comics where I had the juice, I had something they wanted, and I wouldn't give it to them without some added provisions for me. And one of them was Batman Predator 3 with Rodolfo. I had to hire Rodolfo. And it's the last job I worked on with Rodolfo before he went off to Hollywood to become one of the most sought after production artists out there. But oh man, this was so much fun to work on. So much fun to work on. And it, as I said, my swan song working with Rodolfo. So a little bittersweet because I didn't get to work with him on comics again because, nobody in comics can afford him now. So, Phil Hatfield, how do you explain the longevity and survival of Archie comics? Um, Archie, Archie's an anomaly. Um, I credit it with. I think I credit the success with them being available. I mean, you know, you go to the supermarket. My local supermarkets have them in the impulse aisle pockets, and kids see them, and kids don't know what they are, so they buy them. They want, oh yeah, it's a comic book, oh, it's colorful, whatever gets them into it. And so Archie is an entry level comic book, probably one of the only entry level comic books available to the general public, on a regular basis. And my youngest kid, he bought them, and he read a lot of the digests, for a few years, and then I brought one home one day, and he says, I'm not reading them anymore. Oh, I'm like, well, why not? And he goes, I don't think they're funny anymore. He grew out of them. The natural progression of comics. He was never going to be a lifelong Archie fan. I don't think there are many lifelong Archie fans. Um, you know, but they're simply told. They're simple stories, well told at their best. And the cast is appealing. The eternal triangle of Archie, Betty, and Veronica. I mean, that stuff's classic, and it's brand new to kids. Yeah, the stories and the concepts and the jokes are as old as the hills, but they're new to you if you've never seen them before. So I got to work on Archie two different times. The first time I was doing a Governator comic. I've mentioned it before. Stan Lee brought me in to work on a comic featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger as a superhero, and that all fell apart because Arnold's peccadillos at home, and but my editor on it, I kept bothering him. I said, I want to write a classic Archie story, just a classic, retro, whatever, all the tropes of an Archie story. And he didn't understand why. And it's because I want to do it. I want the challenge. And so finally they gave in and they let me write an Archie issue. I'm begging to write this story at like these miserable page rates. So they give in, they let me write the story. And as you can see, my next Archie comic comes almost 2 years later. I run into one of the publishers or editors at Archie at San Diego convention. He comes up to me and he says, "We got so many letters on your Archie story." I was, "Oh, that's good. Were they good? Were they complimentary?" He says, "Yeah. Everybody expressed the same opinion. They said the story was really funny." I said, "Well, I thought Archie stories were supposed to be funny." Apparently not. Apparently they are, I don't know what they are, placeholders, something to put on the paper each month. I don't get it. But he says it was funny. could you write another funny Archie story for us? I'm like, yeah, if I wrote another Archie story, I would try to make it funny. Um, and he said, yeah, we want it to be about a scooter. This is Archie comics. I don't know how their brains work. I think they work like an apple sorter. I don't know. I don't know what the formula is there. I can't argue it's a success, so you can't say they're wrong. But for some reason, they insisted that the issue be about Archie getting a scooter. And I was like, well, that's fine. That's kind of, I can play with that, and I did. And I wrote, I think, an even funnier story than the first one, and it had even more of the classic tropes. And to be helpful, the editor says, have you ever heard of Bob Montana? And I'm like, yeah, the creator of Archie. And he goes, yeah, well, kind of model your stuff on him. Are you familiar with him? And I said, yeah, I read, he did the newspaper strip. Bob Montana didn't do the comics after a while. He had him doing a newspaper strip. And when I was a kid, I thought the newspaper strip was very funny. And the Sunday versions particularly were brilliant. He would tell an entire story in like 10 panels of a Sunday comic with like great economy. It's a study in how to impart a lot of information with not a lot of words if you ever get a chance to look at them. So yeah, I'm very familiar with Bob Montana. I don't think he believed me because as soon as I got home, I got emails with all these scans of Bob Montana strips. I was like, yeah, I have these. I've seen these. So anyway, that's my story with Archie. I'd love to go back and write some more, if they ever have a need to make kids laugh again. So there you go. And I'm sorry to any Archie creators I might be stepping on the toes of, but I don't read any other Archie comics, so I don't know how. I basically modeled my work after the classic stuff from the 40s, 50s. So there you go. Hey, I have a Patreon campaign going in support of Archhaven Comics. At Archhaven, we're going to be doing a lot more digital. We're going to be doing a lot more webtoons. You can subscribe through the Patreon account for as little as $1, and there'll be extras and bonuses. And, you'll know you're supporting good comics. I'm creating a lot of new material, particularly for webtoons, and they're also bringing back. We're bringing back Law Dog. It's being recolored now from the original artwork, and it'll be presented digitally, and it will be part of this new program, this new Patreon program. So if you go over to Patreon, look for Archhaven, there I am. It's pretty much my effort to create a lot of new material, a lot of new content for digital and webtoons, and there's some cool rewards for you if you support it. So there you go. There you have it. I probably talked a little too freely on a couple of these subjects, and I'm going to hear about it. But there you go. This is the real deal. This is Chuck Dixon signing off, and I'll see you down the road.